again, and Severine, sorry. That's yours. There you go. So as you can see, we actually tried our best to have female on panels. I actually love to have women on panels.
You better get off them.
Well, I'll stay close to you, so I will make the main side. And the idea of being here is, again, we want to just spark a conversation. They are all experts. I'm going to quickly introduce you. I've heard about Saskia and Sue, so I'm not going to spend more time on that. But Severine, she's a serial investor in FoodTech and Agtech. She started probably when nobody was looking at the space, I guess. She now works for a VC called Quad.
I used to work for Quad.
Oh, you used to work, okay.
Yeah.
But she's been involved in this space for a long time, and she's invested in Windows.
Windows, Olio, Farm Stand, Food Assembly, Menu Next Door, Insect.
So just to mention some of the ones that you might have heard of because they're based here in the UK.
Yeah.
And then we have Chris Fung, who's an entrepreneur and an investor. So he founded Crush.
Didn't quite found it, I ran it for
okay. Which you might have seen actually down the road. There is a shop called Crush. Have you ever seen it? Anyway. And then he started actually going on the other side of the fence and investing and supporting a number of entrepreneurs, both in food and food tech. But without further ado, I guess you guys kind of know who they are now. And the idea, so we're going to start with a conversation, and then we're going to open it to the floor for you to have, if you have questions, please, would be the opportunity for you to direct them to them. So I'm going to start from Chris. So as I mentioned, he's an investor, but also he's a former entrepreneur. Having also run actually a crowdfunding platform, both on the equity and the reward side, I just wanted to ask you, what do you actually do when it comes to investing in businesses, and how do you think an investor should support food businesses once you've completed your investment?
Yeah. So I guess taking it 2 steps. The first thing, why would I invest in something? I guess I have a view in terms of, everyone talks about the team in the market. That's pretty obvious, and you go through that sort of process of meeting the founders, getting to know the product itself, and also whether or not the market's big enough and interesting enough. So that's sort of basic sort of thing. But what I look for in particular as well is I look for mini monopolies. I look for ecosystem plays, and also I guess the part I add is the domain value add. So the domain knowledge in food and food tech and so on. So I try to look for things that other investors wouldn't see or don't get, so that you can scratch below the surface. And then the last thing is actually about that it should do something good for the world. That element of altruism, if you like, sort of B Corp type sort of stuff. So I look for businesses in that space, if you like. In terms of from an investor, sort of what can you add in terms of value? I think a lot of it's around domain expertise. It's around understanding sort of how it actually works. I mean, a lot of the tech things I see now, I see a lot of tech people trying to do food, but relatively few food people, like people with proper food experience, that are semi-literate in tech. Like I said, semi-literate in tech, not fully tech, but semi-literate, at least able to hold a conversation. So I think I'm one of the few that are probably in that sort of space. A lot of the guys that are sort of literate in tech and food, they're still operating, right? So or they're young, they don't have that experience of actually seen cycles, in terms of recessions and things like that. So from that perspective, I think it's quite different in terms of being able to scratch that sort of surface. So from an investor, so you want them obviously for the network, for people to know, and also sort of domain knowledge as well. And also, an important thing I think is actually the ability to listen and being open-minded. So you will come with your own set of experiences, expertise that you will, that part of your job is to share it. But you've also got to understand that it's the founder's business. You're there to support, and it's checking your ego at the door, understanding actually you're there to support them and their vision.
That's awesome. Thank you very much, Chris. I mean, the reason why I've also asked this question is because one of the reasons, again, I'm more than happy to share it very openly, that we failed to actually make the crowdfunding platform work is because a lot of investors who were reaching out to us, we felt that they were looking to kind of passively invest in these businesses. And having been, some of us, exposed to the food world, we know how difficult it is to actually, run and build a food business. So we always felt a little bit doubtful about actually operating that system. As I guess Chris mentioned, you need to put your money at work the moment you invest in these businesses. It's not about dropping a pile of money and saying, good luck, we'll see you when the exit will arise, right? Fantastic, thank you. So Severine, well, you come from a very deep tech sort of, maybe you can give a little bit of a background about the investments that you guys have.
So actually, I agree 100% with what Sue said. I haven't read the book before yet, but we basically cover most of the spectrum of what Sue explained before. And we had a very holistic view of the food system. I have to mention also that particularity of the fund is that it started in 2006 as an impact investment fund out of Geneva. So and then we opened 2 years ago the London office. So we are at the heart an impact investor, and then we are a VC and food Agtech investor. So everything we do, everything we look at is also from an impact angle, and that's something really important for us. And we would invest and then spend a lot of time to support the business and do sustainability report and make sure that everything would be improved and put then the startup on a trajectory to improve the environment, the wellness of the employees and the ecosystem. So that's important for us. And so I invested across the whole value chain from organic agriculture, investing in a French company called La Ruche-Kiliwi in France. They're known here as a food assembly. And the idea was to create this it started as creating those community for the farmers to actually gather and then sell their products directly to consumers. And then we added that delivery aspect of the business. And they're probably one of the leading marketplaces today in Europe. And then we invested very early in this three crazy guy out of university called Insect. And they're the leading insect company. We invested in their Series A, Series B, and now they are raising 150 million. So to start to build the biggest factory, to actually produce insect powder for fish farms and big pet food companies. So it's also interesting to see that you have to bet really early sometimes, and those guys had barely a PowerPoint and they didn't even have a demo at the time where we invested. And then it's really investing a lot of time, because as Chris said, and we noticed that, and I totally agree with that, there are a lot of amazing tech guys, and there are a lot of food experts coming generally from CPGs, but the combination of both skills, it's actually really difficult to find. So we would spend a lot of time to try to assemble those teams and then educate the team on the tech aspects by bringing tech experts from big data, from blockchain, from engineer, or from the other side to add to these really like deep tech companies, marketing and PR and branding, and try to mix those worlds. And I think one of the main challenges in our food tech industry is actually to recruit enough talents and actually convince serial entrepreneurs from fintech, health tech, medtech that food and agriculture is actually a space where you could invest and create big sustainable business.
Wow, fantastic. And that's is exactly that's the way I see it, in the sense that
so it's great that you're building this platform, because I think that's really something we need, a place where you can gather the talents and the technology, and where the company can reach out and also very, very passionately believe in open collaboration. And I'm like you against most of the accelerator, because sometimes people go there and they don't get the value. I'm also against some VC that promise the startup that they'll get you money and tons of support, and then they invest. And then when difficult time comes, they are not there to support you because they are not that interested in you, because they're not going to make them earn any money. So I think it's extremely important to choose really wisely, very early, your investors. And it's not the one that's going to get you the biggest valuation, it's the one that's going to be there for you when things are going to go wrong, and that can happen really quickly in a business. And and also I want to say, because I've seen the last 6 months huge amount of companies going to those very big famous crowdfunding companies that we are not going to name today, failing miserably their fundraising, then being completely investable, because when you fail on a crowdfunding platform, any VC will want to invest in your business, and then they go to see every other investors in London and Paris, and it's difficult. So you have to be very wise, be very careful with crowdfunding also.
Thank you very much. Say it all. Well, yeah, moving to Sue.
I can't say anything better than that. Wow.
That's true. I think it's important to tell the truth, because we see many people, and I'm quite sad. I've seen people losing their company, losing their house, their mortgage, because they were expecting something that didn't happen. So we have to warn them collectively to be cautious.
Wow. Sue, on you. So she presented, and she's a precursor, if I can, of the global food tech movement in the UK. You started it with TLA.
Okay, fine. That's very kind. Not sure about that.
But what I would like to hear from you was actually, what do you think is missing now in the UK to really flourish, this movement, which after all is made of people, as also Severine said.
I think what I'm seeing, and you're seeing it too, is I'm seeing loads of the big companies, big multinational, industrialised food companies, suddenly realising they cannot innovate. They've got a whole innovation team that spend loads of money on it, costs them millions of pounds, and these amazing people come up with stuff, and then they go, no, we can't do that, it's too risky. So you get these really frustrated guys working inside these companies, and nothing they're doing is coming to market because they just kill it at birth. They can't risk it, So it doesn't happen, and they're just realising that they can't do it. So they're starting to set up their own little innovation hubs and welcoming new companies to try and come up with really interesting stuff. But there's a terrible culture gap between people who work in big companies and small entrepreneurs. Yeah. And we've got to find a way to get those two things to meet in the middle. Because personally, I don't trust those big bastards. I don't trust them. Because if they can screw you over a bit, they sort of would. And you don't know what you're doing. And when it comes to all the legals and all that, you're really out of your depth. And I think we've got to find a way to protect the really great, innovative small guys, to get the best out of the big guys, because they are great at scale, they are great at distribution, they definitely know how to market, and smaller guys generally don't. So we've got to find a way of getting these two polarised people together to solve some of these issues. And that's the biggest challenge for me. Not that we're not entrepreneurial and innovative, because we're all great. And I do have some sympathy with the bigger companies, because they're finding themselves in a difficult position, and we all want artificially cheap food, and we've got to get it all together in a way, and that's what you're trying to do. That's what you're trying to do.
Thank you, Sue.
So that's the challenge.
Yeah, that's incredible. And moving to Saskia. So as you heard, we're a whole year in a very friendly environment. So we invited also someone from the corporate world. But no, also because we actually wanted to hear.
Hear it all the time.
No, because we really wanted to hear also. Well, I think they're doing something quite remarkable as a bank.
We try.
You try. And what I would love to hear is, first, why a bank or a Rabobank that, of course, have their roots into this system. So I think it kind of makes sense, to help also the new innovative companies. But why do you guys have developed Food Bites, and how do you think this whole food revolution that is happening from the entrepreneurial world can actually help you also as a bank to innovate in the future?
Good question. I guess I agree 100% with what Sue just mentioned. We're a corporate ourselves, so we actually face a lot of the same trouble when it comes to innovation as our corporate clients do. So for us, we were also looking at a way, because we felt, you can't really pretend to be the world's leading food and agri bank if you only know what's happening on the corporate level with the big food companies. We really felt like we missed a piece of knowledge in terms of what's happening at the grassroots levels, as in what type of startups, what type of innovations are there. And again, it comes from, I think, a mix of the mission of Rabobank, which is now growing a better world together, or feed the world sustainably in the future, for which you need innovations. And at the other hand, yeah, we are a commercial institution, we're not an NGO, but we also believe that you can actually have a sustainable business and be commercially viable. Because in the end, you can't save the world if you can't sustain your business. So I think for us, we were also looking for ways in which we can engage with food and agri innovation without it being very boring and corporate. So actually FoodBite started a little bit as a kind of a startup work venture in San Francisco, out far from the head office, which is based in Utrecht in the Netherlands. Just basically a couple of colleagues who figured, yeah, can't we organize a pitching event and then see who shows up, let's have some beers, free beers, and then we'll see what happens. Now we're 3 years later, now we've had it 12 times and an average of 100 to 150 startups applying. We have 200 alumni pitch companies now, which we really try to help further with whatever we can. We've invested in one of the companies. We've helped another startup company raise their Series B rounds through actually corporate clients of ours who have investment funds who are looking to invest in a form of alternative protein. It's an American-based company called Myco Technology. They make mushroom protein. So we actually help them raise their rounds, and then there's several other interesting connections we could make with, for example, a UK company called Impact Vision, which is hyperspectral technology, which we linked up with a big sugar client in Mexico, where they actually tried to see if their hardware was applicable on the conveyor belt to test the quality of sugar. So they did a pilot which the corporate paid. It had such a good accuracy rate that now they're actually buying the first hardware of Impact Vision. And that's a cool story, and for us it's also a bit of a win-win, because not always we gain directly from it, which a lot of the more dusty, grey-haired bankers at the bank question us a lot, like why we organize this, what's the business model behind it. But we really believe that our relationship with BSM, the sugar company, improved. It helped create more transparency along the supply chain of sugar. And we were able to help a fantastic startup that we really believe in their hardware, and we were able to help them a step further. So I think that's a win-win-win. Yeah, and again, we're also corporate, everything goes slow. It's highly frustrating sometimes, I won't lie. But I think we're very committed to making this work because we see the benefits for either our corporate clients, as the startups, as for ourselves. Yeah, so I think we're only expanding this. Working very hard now to making London a success. So if you know any very good startups, please tell them to apply. I need them. But we actually have a lot of interest from our corporate clients all over Europe to participate. For us, it's also a way to make them think about what's happening in food and agri innovation, because a lot of them react way too late. So we try to bring them to FoodBite, so just at least show them, hey, this is what's happening in your space. Those companies are here to disrupt your market. So you better start thinking about how to work with them. And I guess that's a starting point for us. And I'm actually very excited to see where we are in 5 years, because I don't know, to be honest. So we'll see.
Great, thank you, Saskia. It's funny that you said that you actually put your corporate customers in the same room, with entrepreneurs, to make them realize that some of them has the same ambition as building, the next Nestle or the next, big company in the world. But some people, and I guess this is also our experience, sometimes they're too caught up in their world to even understand that, maybe that technology, or maybe, those crazy guys, in the garage are going to build a company that's as big as theirs. And I think it's quite reassuring to hear that also, a big bank in this space is helping, the whole ecosystem to actually come together to understand, what's out there. Because I think it all comes, from awareness and understanding, right? Fantastic.
But just to repeat Severine's point, if you don't collaborate now, you won't exist. It doesn't matter whether you're big, it doesn't matter whether you're small. You have to collaborate. You just have to.
Yeah.
That's the only way you're going to survive.
I'm with you, actually.
And in fairness, I've seen a dramatic change, and some of those big clients of Rabo, and I can mention Dupont and Cargill, and we were having conversation 3 years ago. They thought I was someone from another planet, telling them that they have to look outside commodity and they had to start looking at, and just the last 2 years, they started losing money in some of their big markets.
Absolutely.
And the last 2 years, Cargill and Tyson have been the biggest investor in cellular agriculture, proving that sometimes you have to change your mindset. And now they are really, really going to all the conference meeting entrepreneurs at a really early stage. So the mentality is shifting, and it's the same for some of those big CPG, Kellogg, Campbell, Danone have really now programmed to scout and innovate and support startups, and then build program within their organization to actually work with them and accelerate their development.
Wow, that's fantastic. It's also building on these actually.
Finally happening.
Finally happening. I mean, one of our
Finally.
sort of like underlying assumption, and why we actually think we started this and we're still doing it, is because we believe that the only way of changing some of the dynamics of this industry, you know, the dodgy stuff, but also the less, I guess, dodgy, but more, I think, natural evolution of things, is through the people. You know, we believe that food tech, before being a definition, is a movement of people. You know, techies who got excited about working in food, and they started, you know, playing with insects, started playing with soil agriculture, and all of this. So, building on this, starting from the people, I guess, one question that I had for all of you is actually, what do you think are the craziest people out there building companies? And if you can name, so maybe starting actually from mega trends that you're seeing in this space, on the from the investment perspective and also from the corporate, what do you think are the biggest trends and the companies that are better positioned in this market to actually disrupt, you know, this market? You talked about mini monopolies. You talked about monopolies. What do you think are the next monopolies that we're going to be seeing in this sector, both food and food tech? And maybe you can name companies that you think are very well positioned to disrupt existing markets.
So I guess what I mean monopolies, they exist for a period of time, and then someone innovates. You can own that space for a period of time. Example of things I'm looking at and I'm involved in, like Mr. Lee's Noodles, which is a healthy pot noodle, and that part of it is a mini monopoly in an ecosystem play because they have a smart vending machine, which is, as far as I'm concerned, a proprietary distribution channel. So, you know, there are ways of actually breaking out of the existing sort of CPG. So instead of imagine, you know, like a two-dimensional shelf facing, you've got a 3D sort of, you know, vending machine with, you know, sort of video, all sorts of things. You know, so there's ways of looking at things in a different way. I think, you know, some of the bigger trends are, you know, around health and well-being, right? The whole, you know, I've been in that space for the last, you know, 15 years, whatever. But, you know, health and nutrition, personalized nutrition, all that sort of stuff. So things I'm very interested in is how does that sort of fit into, you know, people's lives and so on. And actually there's a gap because there isn't anything that actually is able to measure the inputting of your food yet. So I'm looking for that gap. So we've got the Fitbits, you've got all that sort of stuff, you can track your movement, you've got different diets, your keto diet, you've got, you know, whatever sort of different diets you can, but there's nothing that actually is, you know, picking up what you eat properly. So that part is just, you know, even lifestyle when we're in Sweden, right? They're saying, you know, we've got a gap. People put what they think they ate. They forget, you know, the biscuit, they forget the burger or whatever. Yeah, so that's a whole space that I find absolutely interesting. And then there's a whole thing around transparency, sustainability. So that's where blockchain and things like that came in. The thing I talked about in Sweden was around a couple of books. One was about Truth Machine, which is around, you know, effectively 100% lie detector. But that's now happening in all sorts of different ways. And then the other book that you know was around First Mortal, which is where the whole thing around longevity, personalized nutrition, and so on. And then the last one that I think is really interesting is actually human nature. I believe we're all fundamentally lazy. So convenience is the whole thing. So you see all food delivery stuff, right? You know, all these experiences, you know, VR, AR, and all that kind of stuff. Why? A lot of it is because we're fundamentally lazy. So how do you tap into that? So in a way that is still sustainable and still good for the world. So those are some things I look at.
Thank you. Severine.
Actually, I try to fight against this laziness, actually. and especially, no. Actually, I totally disagree with this. And having two teenagers at home that actually think you can live with the press of a button and get a pizza, a girl, everything, I think it's quite depressing.
It is.
And
it
so,
is.
yeah, so I'm trying to actually go back to having a more human, sustainable, altruistic vision of the food system, trying to think about where should we put my money and money of my investors to work to actually change the system for good. So from there, we looked at a few areas, and like you, I'm a very, very big believer in food transparency, food safety, so we looked massively at blockchain, and I've been following a few companies that work around improving food safety and food transparency, so this is a very big one. I think sustainability is huge, and we invested very early in Wino, we invested very early in Olio, and I've been supporting this ecosystem. And now I'm advising an amazing Israeli company called Tipa. They do fully sustainable packaging, and they're now doing so this packaging is actually fully compostable in less than 40 days. So basically you can throw your food in the bin. And I think there's this kind of entrepreneur that can completely shift the system and actually change the behavior of the big CPG. And it's actually our responsibility to request from those brands to then have those innovations coming to the market. I'm not going to talk about insect because that was one of our big bets, but from that same thinking, we look at urban farming, and we decided to back this German company, InFarm, because they have a very sustainable and very low impact way to produce food within cities where they install urban farming system within supermarkets and restaurants, where customers can buy directly the food, the micro-herbs, and without actually, by reducing 90% of the water usage and reducing completely the CO2. So again, it's an important sustainable play for us. And I'm passionate, and I've been passionate. I've been a patron here of the Soil Association for years, so everything's going to improve. Fundamentally, what we eat and the organic innovation, so promote organic farming till permaculture and every innovation and technology that can support biopesticide, biofertilizer, and basically reduce the amount of crop and fertilizer that we put in our soil, because if we don't stop that, we're all going to die from cancer, and it's not the stupid personalized nutrition or your healthy smoothie that's going to save us nor the planet. So I think we have to be really engaged also and be responsible investors.
I wish I sat before you.
What do you add to that?
So I agree wholeheartedly with those. I mean, one of the things that I'm seeing, which I think is quite interesting, is plant-based. That's not going away. And loads of people will say, ooh, they're a vegan, there's something wrong with them. Well, that's fine. You get dedicated vegans, and good luck to them. But I think what we're seeing is a load of people going plant-based, you know, either one day a week or during the week, or shifting that. And a lot of people are committed to eating less meat for all sorts of reasons. And let's face it, we can't. I mean, cows are like the worst things on the planet, aren't they? In terms of the amount of water, how we look after them, the gas they produce, et cetera, et cetera. And I think if I was developing stuff now, I'd be looking at. Vegans are really happy, I think, quite often to have something that doesn't replicate meat. That they're happy with a taste profile. There's a taste profile all of its own because it's vegetable based. I think if you're going to win carnivores off meat, you've got to come up with something that is replicating meat in the way it smells, looks, reacts, cooks, everything. And that is the way. I was with a guy who's made these amazing vegan burgers. I mean, just incredible. If I knew it was a vegan burger that actually was exactly like meat, tasted like it, looked like it, cooked like it, and had a choice between that and the vegan one, I'd take the vegan one every time. And I think there's a massive market for carnivores eating plant-based, as well as people who are dedicated to being plant-based full time. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And I think there's a shift between people flexing between that.
That's true.
But I think less meat is a big movement, and we all need help on that. No matter how much you like meat, guys, it's something we're going to have to do.
Thank you. Saskia.
One was boring.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of one that has not been mentioned. I actually have two, I guess. One is companies combating food waste. But then I agree with Chris that I'm sometimes a bit skeptical about the consumer side. So I think companies who actually manage to, for example, upcycle food waste into new products or really have that reliability at the producer side might have more impact. And another one, what we see is on the farming side, actually more on the Agtech side, that nowadays it's very difficult for farmers to find successors or to find enough labor on the farm. With Brexit, it's only going to be more difficult. So I truly also believe that in a lot of Agtech developments in terms of robotics, which can actually replace labor on farms, also has a lot of potential, because in the end we will need to produce more food more effectively. And if less and less younger people actually want to own a farm, then we do need to look for ways of how to scale up those farms and find a way to produce the food, get the food on our plate, with less people who are actually involved with their hands in the sector.
I also think we're going to find a lot more ultra-local. So I think we're going to find a lot more, and I'm seeing a lot more, let's say, underground farms and all sorts of other things where they're serving the local community. Because we cannot keep, my favourite is Fiji water, shipping water from Fiji for us to drink in the middle of London. I mean, as if we haven't got enough water here. But it's that. I think there's going to be more, and in terms of food security and other things, that's the way to go. So we're going to see more food produced locally for local people.
Fantastic. Then I would like to open it to the floor. Do you guys have any questions? I'll happy to grab the mic, or you can use actually mine. Anyone with a question? You have an amazing opportunity to ask questions to real experts, whether it is also as consumers, what are we going to be eating, in the next few years? Thank you, Saskia. If you can just
Sure. My name is Ash, and listening to you, I was reminded by a quote from Thomas Edison, who said that nutrition will be the future medicine of doctors. The problem is that doctors haven't woken up to that. Right? I think they don't really understand the true value of nutrition. Do you think, how do we connect what you're saying and clearly all those things to this fact that nutrition has to be used to basically offset those millions and millions of antibiotics floating around the world? That's my question.
Wow, that's a big question. Does anyone of you want to take it?
Well, Theresa May needs a good slap round the head, basically. So
She always needs a good slap round.
Although, to be fair to her, she's got a huge amount on her plate. That's a good pun. I'm really, really disappointed that none of this is on school curriculum, which is a disgrace to me. So why we're teaching kids to learn dates in history when you look that up on Google, I'm not quite sure, when actually what we could do is teach children where their food comes from, how to cook it, and all the stuff to do with nutrition should be a major plank of the curriculum. And the current government, but to be fair, the previous government have just deliberately taken it off the agenda, even though they've been lobbied very, very hard. And I find that really disappointing, because if we don't educate children, then we are lost. Because that's how it all works. So that for me is a terrible omission. There's loads of other ways of solving it as well, of course.
I think there's a lot of, from the nutrition. I mean, I spent a lot of time in that for the last couple of decades. There is a movement. Like doctors are starting to get it. We're seeing a whole bunch of things. I was in Sardinia at something called AFS, and the whole theme of the thing was around longevity, where people like Ben Greenfield talking, basically hacking is biohacking, it's sort of quantified self stuff. So I'm quite interested in that stuff. But this goes back to what I was saying. The gap at the moment is that there's no way to measure your inputs easily. This goes back to human nature. We're lazy. Right? So when you forget to write down that you've eaten a burger or half a burger, how do you do that and make that seamless and automatic? The moment we do that, and someone solves that problem, we'll start getting to this point where the nutrition, because you can start measuring it properly. At the moment, there are companies trying to do that. Like when we were in Sweden a couple of weeks ago, there are a bunch of guys from Finland that are looking at sort of taking villages and cities, the evidence of that. So at the moment, it's being pioneered by like the Tim Ferrisses of the world on an N of 1, right? Which is great because it starts at somewhere, and then the biohacking stuff starts coming out more and more.
I sort of agree and disagree with what you're saying. My name's Nervo. I think nutrition, you can measure nutrition accurately, but health is not an exact science. You know when you're fat or you're not fat, or you're feeling well or you're feeling ill. When you start losing weight, you don't have to know how many, it helps to know how many pounds you've lost, but when your trousers are a bit loose or you feel a bit better. So these things come instinctively. So that's the first thing. And I think this thing about nutrition and how does it, governments can't make us eat the food that they want or not eat the food they want. They can set up policies that people have to follow. I think because health is such a significant, we all worry, we all want to look good, we don't want to fall ill. We listen to what doctors say, we listen to what nurses say, we listen to what hospitals say. So I think a lot of that information about nutrition and good food and good eating and less medication should really come from the medical institutions. So when you go and see your GP, the GP should have the balls to say you shouldn't eat that medicine, but you should start eating this kind of food. The problem is the doctors are also regulated by the institutions that says you must prescribe this medicine for this medicine for that. And I think that's the kind of thing that needs to change.
That's all correct. I think that stuff takes time, because if you understand, most doctors, they've studied one term of nutrition throughout the whole degree, right? Or not at all, right? Once you're out in the, as a doctor, you're supposed to be an expert. You've invested all those hours of time and study and all that. Then you've got the pharma sort of institute behind that, so the pharma sort of industry behind that, also pushing sort of that we want to cure stuff as opposed to avoid prevent stuff. It'll take a while. It will take a while, but it is there. Governments have their place because they shift their policy on food and tax, that sugar tax, things like that. Those things over time will make an impact. They're just not very well informed as a general sort of thing, I think.
I'll take one more question. Well, how many? Wow. We'll take a girl one.
Two more
Can you
questions.
just go over?
Just firstly, really interesting. I'm Mary, I run Honest Food, and I'm a registered nutritionist, but I used to work as senior nutritionist for Jamie Oliver, so worked really closely on school campaigns and so massively believe in that, but also really interested in nutrigenomics. But I think it definitely is a multifaceted approach. I think it has to be taken from every angle in order for it to work. With Honest Food, I think businesses have to play a role and they have to be more responsible in what they're doing. And at the moment we're writing our mission statement, but what we're finding really difficult is actually how do you cut through the bullshit, because all these companies are saying all the things we're doing, but we're actually doing it and they're not. So how do you get past and actually make a consumer know that you are transparent, you are honest, whilst other companies are just using those buzzwords?
Wow, that's a question for the entrepreneurs and the investor, I guess.
It's an excellent question. And to give an example, there's at least 2 girls that started an association in France to establish this idea of a label, and it's called Nutri-Score. And basically they requested, and it was supported and funded by the government, and the idea is basically on every CPG now have the obligation to put on their package the amount of protein, calorie, etc. per serving. And everybody agreed, the next Danone, PepsiCo, they all agreed they had basically till next year to compare to that obligation. So any customer could check online and within the supermarket. It happened that PepsiCo and Coca-Cola, and I forgot the third one, lobbied together to pay people, and then it got delayed, and then basically only Danone and another 2 companies are doing it, and so it's finished. But I think you're right, and I'm a passionate activist about the fact that every consumer has to take responsibility for its own health. And I think that's why we need to support more social media, community, magazine, trying to empower the consumer to eat healthily. And I think there's also a lot of bullshit about nutrition, especially coming from America, and all that stupid trend about personalized nutrition. And the good example is Campbell, who funded with 14 million this company called Habit, which is actually a big hack. And there's nothing healthy behind it. I think what's healthy is to educate kids, and Sue is totally right, from kindergarten to appreciate what's a broccoli, what's a carrot, and the fact that you just basically need to eat fruits, vegetables, a bit of fish, very little meat, plant-based food. That's it. All the rest is crap. And if we are more and more of us to actually educate the kids, people will know. And actually, it's interesting. I advise now a few big corporates, and they see that they are not selling their sugary snacks. They are not selling their sugary drinks because consumers don't want to buy them anymore. So this is changing, and your generation, the millennials, are totally pushing that movement. We just need to support that information and that transparency to make this happen. And nobody, and I bet, I'm quite optimistic, that in 30 years we won't drink Coca-Cola anymore. Yes!
I think the answer is you vote with your feet and with your purse and your wallet. That's what you do, and you out people on social media. And we do have the power to do that. We didn't used to do that 20 years ago.
Yeah.
And if you look at some of the food, things that have come out, those companies are finished now if they do that wrong. They're finished, and they bloody well know it.
But it also shouldn't just be nutrition, and it shouldn't just be sustainability. They should come together. It should be a whole.
Sure.
It should be more plant-based. Companies have to not just have that USP, and that's the problem with our tagline. Is we're going, oh, we want to do that. Right, that's hard because we don't have a USP. But actually, shouldn't that be how all companies think?
I think you have to do one step at a time.
Yeah.
You can't eat elephant in one bite, so you just have to gradually do it a little bit at a time, and you just work your way towards it. And you just got to be patient, and you take the quickest win first, and then you gradually hack away at the rest, and that's how it works. If you try and do it all at once, you'll never do it. But just vote with your feet, use social media, out people, and there's definitely a trend. Their sales are going down, and they are beginning to panic.
Yeah.
They're beginning to panic.
And don't worry about what the others are doing. I think that's my best advice. Stay focused on what you do. Grow your own customers, and then they will follow. But don't look at the rest trying to change, trying to say, oh, but it's this brand is saying sustainable, maybe I change my packaging. You don't care. You have to find your own voice and do your products, and customers will come back, will follow you.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. I would like to join me in share some words of wisdom with us. Thanks again for coming down. Thank you guys for coming. We're going to stick around until 9:30ish, 9:45. Then we'll need to free the space, but please go and enjoy all the food and drinks that is left. And thanks again for coming.